A serene community in northern Georgia is rattled by a horrible tragedy.
I think we've run up on a dead body. There's blood. He's like really tired.
There was 4 shots. 3 in the head, 1 in the body.
This was an execution, just an ambush.
With no clear leads, investigators must examine the lives of several individuals on the fringe of society.
A lot of people just thought, oh, well, this guy's just a drug addict. But it wasn't like that.
He didn't like people to judge him. He couldn't stand it.
He was an outsider. Nobody really gave him a chance.
The search for the truth will unravel a twisted romance and expose the lengths 2 desperate people would go to fulfill their darkest desires.
She wanted to find somebody that would do anything for her.
Basically did what he had to do to make sure I didn't die.
They're romanticizing what they've done and that they're outlaws together.
She didn't care which one of them died. She just wanted someone to kill for her.
That's pure evil, I think.
In the shadows of the Appalachian Mountains, Murray County, Georgia is an idyllic place to get away from it all.
There's just a lot of places that you can just get by yourself and enjoy nature.
But on March 16th, 2020, a disturbing 911 call sends ripples across the county.
Murray 911. Yeah, I think we've run up on a dead body.
You think you've run up on a dead body?
Yeah, he's on the trail and there's the body laying there. He's not responding. I mean, what should I do?
Do you see his chest moving at all?
No, there's blood. There's no pulse. He's like really pale.
All right, so just stay right there, okay? I got EMS, fire department, and law enforcement on the way.
Investigators with both Murray County and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation race to the scene.
Some of our investigators had already arrived, and there is a walkway down the shoulder of the road to just a common fishing area near the bridge. And that's where we'd seen the dead body.
I received a phone call from the Murray County Sheriff's Office. It said, Adam, we need you. We've got a white male, unidentified, deceased. He was found by fishermen. I made my way down the trail. I come across this male laying on the ground, all black, black boots, black pants, black shirt, black hair, fingernail polish. Not to be stereotypical, but maybe like a goth type person, which in Murray County is not normal. Murray County is more, country boys. There's gonna be a lot of denim, outdoor wear, that type of things, especially if you're at the river.
He did have some distinguishing tattoos.
I believe on the right arm, it was a skull tattoo with an emblem in the skull. We noticed that there's blood pooling around the head. It was apparent that there was some type of injury to the head, and there was a wound on the torso. It was apparent that the body hadn't been thrown off the bridge. It was too far away. There were no drag marks, anything like that around the body. So it was kind of like, how did you get here? There's no wallet. There's no identification. There's no cell phone. There's nothing else around him that would suggest who this person is. So I'm at a disadvantage at this point.
Investigators immediately shift their focus to the men who discovered the victim.
We don't know who done it, and whoever was on scene was a suspect.
It's not uncommon for people who have killed people to call the police and say, oh, look what I found.
My mind is thinking, who are they? What are they? Why are they here?
They were in their late teens, early 20s. 3 of them had went down this trail beside the bridge. 1 had separated to go to a better fishing area, and this is where he finds this body. And his friends hear him scream for help, and they run to him and call 911. Their story was adding up for where they were at, what they were doing, and why they were there. So they were pretty quickly removed from suspicion for having anything to do with this death. So that question of who is my victim, that's just ringing in our heads at this point. Like, we got to figure out who you are to see what happened to you. We're checking local counties for missing person, even Tennessee, like, hey, do you have anybody meeting this description that's been missing for a couple of days? We're just striking out every turn with trying to identify who this individual is. We've just ran everything that we can. And we all go home. About 5 to 6 hours later, I'm trying to rest, get settled in for the evening, and I get an interesting phone call. It was forwarded from Whitfield County 911. Pat Culvert's calling, advising that her 27-year-old grandson, Kenny Bunn, hasn't been seen, and she had heard that their body had been found on Carlton Petty Road, which is not far from where Kenny's mother, Trina Wilson, lives. So we immediately follow this lead down. We go to Miss Pat's house.
They sent detectives up there to talk to us. They just introduced herself and everything, and I was in shock.
That was kind of a huge aha when we got to talk to Pat, because she describes Kenny to pretty much a T.
He had a pair of black pants on. He had a black shirt on. He had black rimmed glasses on. He had a little tattoo on his shoulder.
I showed a picture of him, his most recent picture that he had taken of himself. I could tell it was him by the look on the detective's face.
We were able to establish that Kenny lived with Pat, and you could tell a great deal of concern was there and love. After speaking with Pat and Trina, I'm very confident that our John Doe at the bridge is going to be Kenny Bunn.
It was like a nightmare. It just didn't seem right. It still don't seem right,
Born in 1992 in Dalton, Georgia, Kenneth Bunn was a shining light to his large and loving family.
He was a handful when he was little. He was always curious, and he'd do anything I'd done. He'd run on my heel all the time, following me everywhere I went.
You couldn't never get him to settle down. He would always want to do something. And he was just like a little ray of light. He was always there to protect me, no matter what. You didn't talk about his mama. And I always took up for him, no matter what.
Kenny spent a lot of time at my mom's while he was working.
I felt like he was my son, because he stayed there so much. We always called him Little Kenny. He was a sweetheart.
As close as Kenny was with his family, he didn't always feel like he fit in with his peers.
He started doing the piercings and stuff and everything. I'm thinking about 7th and 8th grade. They say a lot of Gothic, that's how they feel like they're loners or isolators or whatever. They're just different. I think he was trying just to express how he's feeling in the inside.
To people around here, somebody who looks like Kenny looked would be very scary, but they would have no idea that on the inside he is the sweetest person that you could ever meet.
After struggling to find himself, Kenny had gotten his life on track by his mid-20s.
He's doing so well. He has a car. He's got his blue Mustang that he was obsessed with. He loved his Mustang. He got a really good job in construction. He was making a ton of money. He really liked his job.
But something was missing.
Kenny was obsessed with love. He wanted to find somebody that could love him as much as he could love them.
He was struggling with broken heart because his 2 girlfriends cheated on him. He was looking for a soulmate, and he wanted him a little family and stuff.
He had a life ahead of him that he wanted, and he was out to seek it.
But Kenny's life is tragically cut short when investigators find his body near the banks of the Conasauga River.
I didn't want to believe it, you know. I couldn't believe anybody'd do that.
You're numb. You don't know what to do. You're just sitting there thinking that it's not him.
Detectives request an autopsy immediately. The medical examiner confirms that Kenny has been dead for nearly 12 hours and died from multiple gunshot wounds.
It was 4 shots, 3 in the head, 1 in the chest, I believe, torso area. They were able to confirm that it was a small caliber.
He didn't have any defensive marks on him. You can just kind of tell he just crumpled up and fell. I don't think he ever really knew what was happening.
I'm not a medical examiner, but I would say an execution.
Since Kenny's personal belongings were missing from the crime scene, investigators couldn't rule out if he had been ambushed for robbery or it was something more personal.
Coming up, a witness exposes skeletons in Kenny's closet.
There's a bunch of people that wanted to beat him up and then wanted him dead.
He was going to go buy weed from a drug dealer. It caused a fight between them.
And a suspicious couple elicits concern from investigators.
Did he do something?
We know y'all were camping out around the bridge, and you know something happened down there.
Investigators in Murray County, Georgia, have identified the body found on the banks of the Conasauga River as 27-year-old Kenny Bunn. Now, authorities need to determine how Kenny ended up there.
As an investigator, my next thing is, who did this person hang out with? Who was an integral part of their life? Who did they spend a lot of time with? Was there anyone that didn't like them?
Kenny's family had no idea who would want to hurt him. Kenny's grandmother had last seen Kenny leaving her house about 7:45 the previous evening.
Pat gives us information that apparently Kenny had left to walk to a store that's not far from Pat's house.
He said, Mama, he said, I'll be back. He didn't come back.
Kenny's family informs detectives that shortly after he left, Kenny's ex-girlfriend, 20-year-old Nadya Swartz, had shown up at the house looking for Kenny.
Kenny and Nadya got together around in October of 2019. He met her on social media, browsing after he had split up from his last girlfriend.
According to Kenny's family, the couple got serious fast.
He felt strongly about Nadya. I think Kenny just really, really wanted to be in a loving, committed relationship.
They lived with me 3 to 4 months, and she broke up with him. They were split up 3 or 4 months, and she kept coming up. I reckon giving him hope. He'd tell me anything I'd say. I love her.
So asking Pat where she believed Kenny had went when he had left the house, Kenny liked to go to Harry's convenience store. It's about 3/4 of a mile away from Pat's house. Harry's has surveillance cameras, and we go and the clerk allows us to review the video. And sure enough, we see Kenny wearing the clothes that he had on at the bridge, on foot by himself, walk into the store. And a couple of minutes later, you see a blue Honda CR-V pull up. And you see Nadya Swartz. She parked at the gas pump, and she walked in, and there's no audio recording, but you can see that they're talking. And at the end of the transaction, Kenny goes and gets in Nadya's car, and you see them drive out of the parking lot. Nadya being the last person with Kenny, I know that I need to find Nadya Swartz. We need to have a talk. So I reapproached Trina, Kenny's mom. She gives us a brief description of where Nadya's mother lives in Murray County.
When investigators arrive at Nadya's mother's house, They learn Nadya lives nearby with her new boyfriend, 20-year-old Justin Hooker.
We're able to establish that Nadya and Justin have their own apartment. We just tell Nadya's mother, hey, we really need to talk to them about something serious, the murder of Kenny Bunn.
Nadya's mother called Nadya, and she and Justin came over to speak to investigators.
They appeared to be almost like a gothic type. Just black clothing, hair in the eyes, kind of maybe one eye showing, so to speak.
So we just go in and interview Nadya and Justin.
How long have y'all two been together?
We've been together 2 months, but we've known each other for about 5 years or more.
Did y'all go to school together?
Yeah.
I kind of ease into the whole relationship with Kenny, and eventually what I end up asking Nadya is if she had contact with Kenny. Nadya does say that she went and she met up with Kenny. Well, when I ask that, you see Justin, like, that tension. You can see the veins in his arm. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, is he upset that Nadya has went and visited an ex-boyfriend and he's just now finding out about it?
But Nadya explains that her visit with Kenny was anything but romantic. She tells investigators that he had asked her for a ride to a friend's place on the night of March 15th.
She met up with Kenny because she still considered him a friend, and when he told her he was going to go buy weed from a drug dealer, it caused a fight between them.
I didn't take him there. He got mad at me. He's like, well, stop here and I'm going to get out. I'm like, no, you're not going to go there either. He's like, I don't care what you say. Just drop me off here and just leave me. So that's what I did. I pulled over. He got out of the car, started walking. He would be like so mad at me if I don't get his next fix, so I just drove off.
Nadya claims she has no idea where Kenny went because she returned to the home she shared with Justin.
According to Justin, he had stayed home most of the day and went to visit his brother and his girlfriend around 7 or 8 that evening. Justin claimed he stayed at his brother's house most of the evening and then returned home around midnight.
Justin and Nadya, they maintained that they were together, just hanging out at their apartment that night.
All right. Do you know anybody that, you're talking about him hanging out with drug dealers, do you know anybody that would want to hurt Kenny?
Kenny tell me there's a bunch of people that wanted to beat him up and then want him dead. So, and he would never give me names. It's just a lot of people.
Did you know any of them, or have you ever seen any of them?
I really don't know.
Still, Nadya insists that Kenny's death could be connected to a drug deal gone bad.
I appreciate y'all's time. Y'all have any questions, Joy?
Don't think so.
Okay. Very good.
Without evidence to connect Nadya or Justin to Kenny's death, investigators reach out to Kenny's closest friends. They confirm that Kenny had dealt with conflict in the small community because of his lifestyle.
When me and Kenny met, it was kind of like we were just going into middle school, so what people thought of us is that we were just really weird. We dressed different, we acted different. I think Kenny acted like he didn't care, but I'm sure deep down, a lot of the bullying and stuff got to him.
He didn't like people to judge him. He couldn't stand it. I think he tried to show people that you don't judge people by their looks. You need to get to know them first.
Kenny gets out of high school and immediately gets in a long-term relationship with the girl he was dating before, Nadya. And they are like not good for each other. They were doing drugs together. Kenny was like really big into weed. I think a lot of people just like thought, oh, well, this guy's just a drug addict. But it wasn't like that.
Kenny's friends explained that he struggled with depression. So in 2019, he decided to make a change.
Kenny finally gets out of this relationship, finally gets off of these drugs, and he's doing so well. He was finally like a little less depressed. He was sending me videos and, pictures of him smiling and dancing and having a good time.
Kenny's friends and family tell police there's no way Kenny had relapsed, ostensibly ruling out the theory that Kenny may have been involved in a drug deal gone wrong.
I don't believe that because my son, he was sober. he was getting his life back together.
So why would Nadya make that allegation?
She knew that he had a problem with drugs in the past.
Given Kenny's prior history, investigators couldn't rule out the theory. But there wasn't any drug dealer, and there wasn't any connection to the drug world investigators could find at that time.
With few leads to go on, investigators head back to the crime scene the next day.
We did just a quick neighborhood canvass, stopping cars that were traveling the road. Hey, have you seen anything between this time and that time? Trying to get anything and everything.
We actually talked to the farmer who owned the property, and he was like, hey, at one point there was a guy with a shopping buggy with an orange chainsaw in it. There was a white female with him. I'd been seeing them in the bridge area a lot.
This guy had been acting erratic, and he carried what could be considered an extremely dangerous weapon. This area of Georgia is just off US 411, which is a highway that runs from Tennessee through Georgia and into Alabama. More than 300 miles of often rural highway where vagrants and drifters can almost go undetected by law enforcement. Sometimes these drifters turn out to be dangerous fugitives and seek these rural mountain communities to escape capture.
And I'm thinking, maybe we got a witness, or maybe the person who killed Kenny.
Investigators immediately begin the task of searching for the man. The following day, they make a crucial discovery when they drive past a small gas station.
We see a shopping cart with an orange chainsaw in it. We go inside and ask the clerk, who does that cart belong to? The clerk directs us to an individual that's outside attempting to wash a vehicle for money. What are the odds of finding this guy in this rural area at this gas station when we just happen to be driving by? We approach this individual, and right off the bat, he's nervous. Was very elusive in his answering our questions.
What's your name?
Sorry?
What's your name?
Jesse.
Jesse. What's your last name?
I don't get up my name, sorry.
As an officer, it's automatically like, this guy's hiding something from him.
There was dead bodies found down there. We're just trying to see if somebody saw it.
Very serious, or you around? Was it a man or a woman?
It was a man.
I mean, I was definitely told y'all, because I've been like, oh God, they're going to think I killed this son of a bitch.
Less than 48 hours after 27-year-old Kenny Bunn was found shot to death, investigators are speaking with a suspicious person who was seen near the crime scene in the days leading up to the murder.
You live around here? How do you get down here?
Walk.
Hey, Jesse, did you say that we could look through your buggy?
Go ahead, go free, buddy.
Jesse was in fact wanted out of Tennessee, and that's why he did not want to give us his full name, date of birth, things of that nature.
As investigators continue questioning Jesse, his girlfriend arrives.
What's your name?
My name?
I'm Adam Jones with the GBI State Police. This is my partner, Agent Wilson.
Did he do something?
We know y'all were camping out around the bridge, and you know something happened down there.
Did there?
And we were just wondering if you had seen anything, anybody down there.
The woman is quick to offer an alibi for the Sunday night Kenny was killed.
His girlfriend explained to us that they had been staying under the bridge, but on this Saturday and Sunday, they had been in Tennessee conducting some illegal activities. They were stealing copper from an abandoned house, which did give them a good alibi.
But hell, I didn't kill nobody, I swear.
No, we don't think you did.
That allowed us to eliminate who he was, why he would have been out there at the bridge. We did let local law enforcement for Tennessee know who we were dealing with, and they were glad to have Jesse come stay at their facility in Tennessee. We're probably 3 days into it at this point. We had already done like the best you could do a neighborhood canvass on a stretch of highway with a handful of houses and just talking to people. I remember going back to the office. We're trying to figure out what to do at this point, what direction. I remember Adam was on a whiteboard, we jot down everything. And I remember receiving a phone call from one of our local attorneys.
And the local attorney said, hey, I have a client that I've just been talking to, and he knows something about the case that you're working on. And that's when things really started moving.
We hightail it straight to this law office and speak to this client. He wanted to provide information on a possible murder weapon for Kenny's death.
So you sold a gun. It may have been used in the commission of a crime we're looking at.
Yeah. It was a .22 LR Heritage. I got at the academy like 5-6 months ago.
What's the guy's name?
Justin.
Justin Hooker.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, when did you sell to him?
I sold to him Saturday, man.
This last Saturday?
Yeah, the day before it happened.
We know that Kenny was shot with a small caliber weapon, which is what the .22 was. And so this was huge. This was paramount to our investigation. This person tells us Justin said it was for home defense, where him and Nadya were staying at their apartment. They've been having some issues, and he just wanted to have this gun for self-protection.
But as news spread about Kenny Bunn's murder, the informant tells investigators that he became suspicious about Justin's motives.
So I had to call Justin. I asked him, I said, so did you do it? Was it with my gun, dude? And he said, don't worry. And I said, was it with my goddamn gun? And he said, yeah. And I said, why the would you do that?
He didn't know that's what he was going to do, but he is terrified that he's going to get drug into this.
He thought he was going to be in trouble for providing a murder weapon to Justin.
I mean, I can't be all, I don't want any trouble, you know what I'm saying?
Investigators theorize that Justin may have acted out of jealousy due to the fact that Nadya and Kenny kept in touch.
It appeared to be maybe a lover's triangle, so to speak.
Detectives are beginning to believe that Nadya may have initially lied to them, so they press the informant for more details.
Did he say that his girlfriend was with him when he did?
Yeah.
And what we want to know is the elements around who killed who and why.
I have no idea.
What did he do with the gun after?
I had no freaking clue, man.
After the interview was over, I said, hey, it's the sun ain't gonna say it today before we catch them. It really took off at that point.
Coming up, the hunt for Justin Hooker and Nadya Swartz intensifies, leading investigators to face conflicting stories.
Y'all got the wrong people who didn't do anything.
Well, I can't lie anymore because the guilt's just eating me up.
Three days into the murder investigation of Kenny Bunn, authorities have zeroed in on Justin Hooker as their primary suspect.
We're able to determine that Justin works for Whitco Produce in Dalton, Georgia, and this company is actually owned by Justin's family.
We went there to try to find him. He wasn't there.
We start accelerating at this point. I've got all these agents and detectives and investigators from Dalton Police Department, Murray County Sheriff's Office, special agents with the GBI. We're all out working.
Units went to where Justin lives and then kind of set up surveillance on the house. We had other units looking for Miss Nadya.
When investigators reach out to Justin's friends and family, they say they haven't seen him. But authorities do learn more about the troubled young man. Like Kenny Bunn, Justin had always been an outsider.
Justin, when he was in high school, he would get picked on a lot. Just because of how he was dressed. Just because of how he talked. Justin loved wearing black and growing his hair out long, you know. He enjoyed chains and stuff. Just really wanted to shock people with how he was dressed. He wanted people to look at him, but not look at him.
At one point, Justin was homeless in his late teens. He was living out of a vehicle. He'd gotten in a few run-ins with law enforcement for theft, and he was just kind of generally having a hard time making good decisions.
Despite the hardships, Justin never had a problem with romance.
I found Justin to be just like very empathetic, you know? He was very sweet with it. I had very, very deep emotions for Justin. And when we broke up and I found out he was dating Nadya within a month and a half of us breaking up, it hurt.
Friends tell detectives that Justin's infatuation with Nadya had developed quickly and intensely.
At this point, you're getting leads about this relationship with Nadya and Justin and Kenny. And we're able to learn there was an altercation between Justin and Kenny.
The altercation had taken place a few months earlier, not long after Kenny and Nadya had broken up. Words were exchanged, and allegedly, Justin had threatened to blow Kenny's head off if he didn't leave Nadya alone.
I really don't know exactly why Kenny and Justin didn't get along other than Nadya. So that was the common factor they two had together, is in between Nadya.
Despite the threats, Kenny wasn't willing to give up on Nadya.
I remember him telling me about her, and I think that Kenny knew that she's a toxic person and that it was a toxic environment and relationship, but he was also just in love with the idea of being in love. So, you know, he would do anything to try to keep that connection and that relationship together.
As investigators widen their search for Justin, they uncover one more important detail.
Investigators spoke to Justin's brother and his brother's live-in girlfriend. They told authorities that Justin did not come by their home the night of the murder. In fact, they hadn't seen Justin in weeks, which totally undermined his alibi.
On March 19th, 3 days after Kenny's murder, the GBI's surveillance pays off when agents finally apprehend Justin Hooker as he tries to sneak back into his apartment.
Law enforcement goes and takes Justin in custody, transports him to Murray County Sheriff's Office for us.
When Nadya learns that Justin has been arrested, she turns herself in.
I wanted to interview them apart from each other because you could kind of tell that together they were stronger. So I wanted to divide and conquer.
It is Thursday, March the 19th, 2020. Time is 5:05 p.m. Special Agent Adam Jones conducting an interview with Justin Hooker at the Murray County Sheriff's Office interview room.
Justin, he looked apprehensive, scared, thinking, I wonder what he's going to say.
I'll be able to see my girlfriend, know she's okay.
Why do you want to see her?
Just because if they picked me up, I'm sure they picked her up, and I'm sure she's scared. She got anxiety.
All right. Do you have any idea why we're here?
I'm guessing this is about what y'all talked to me and her about the other day. Y'all got the wrong people, though.
Why's that? Why do you say that?
Because we didn't do anything.
Okay. You didn't buy a pistol, or you did buy one a while back, right?
Yeah.
What kind of pistol was it?
It was a 20, the smaller.
He starts to say 22, but catches himself and says 20 and stops.
Well, listen, what you got to realize is we're not here just by chance. We just did pick you up by random, right? We know. And the best thing to do is just come clean with it.
I confront him with that, and I kind of see Justin's posture, his shoulders sink in, and it's kind of like a defeat posture. And I'm kind of at the edge of my chair waiting for him to say the next thing, and he's like, I want an attorney. And it's just like, I'm deflated.
In another interrogation room, investigators hope Nadya Swartz is more willing to speak.
All right, so tell me about what happened on Sunday.
Okay. Well, I can't lie anymore because of guilt just eating me up. I was talking to Justin about what Kenny was basically did to me in the past. How much he put me into depression because he was threatening to kill me ever since I got with him. like constantly threatened to kill me. I've been telling him how Kenny basically had a knife to my leg right here, and he's like, if you try to leave, I'm going to cut your leg off.
I like to just let people tell their version of facts. But then, while we're interviewing Nadya, some of the things were not adding up.
Kenny wasn't an abuser. That's not who he was.
Nadya claims that on the night of Kenny's murder, she and Justin decided to confront Kenny together.
That night, I just want to know why he did that. I just want to know what I did so wrong for me to go through all that with him for 4 months.
Nadya claimed that when she picked Kenny up from the gas station, Justin was in the car.
Justin was in the back seat. He's like, remember, I'm here with you.
So when you guys go to the river, did Justin stay in the back seat?
Justin stayed in the car.
Okay.
And me and Kenny got out, and Kenny said he wanted me back. He was begging and pleading for me back, saying, if you don't come back with me, I'm going to kill you. And that's when he ran up to me and scared me. So I punched him in the stomach. And Kenny was like, you're going to regret that. And he had that death stare in his eyes, like everything was blank. He came at me like that, like he was going to strangle me. Justin freaked out and basically defended me.
How did he defend you?
That's when I noticed he had the gun. And Justin basically did what he had to do to make sure I didn't die.
What did Justin do?
Shot him. It was self-defense.
But investigators aren't buying Nadya's claims.
We were able to disprove that Kenny got physically violent with Nadya by doing a search warrant to photograph Nadya's body. She had no injuries on her that would suggest that she was being strangled or had been gripped violently anyway. So I knew Nadya was lying to me.
Nadya Swartz and Justin Hooker have been arrested for the shooting of Nadya's ex-boyfriend, 27-year-old Kenny Bunn. While Nadya has implicated her new boyfriend, Justin, as the killer, she claims that the murder was committed in self-defense.
Well, there's a lot of force that comes with strangulation. There should be some marks on her body. She didn't have any injuries.
Kenny's friends and family are also adamant that Nadya's allegations of abuse are fabricated.
I think it's important for everybody to know who Kenny really was. Kenny was not violent to her or anyone.
She is a manipulator. I think she controlled the relationships. I think she actually was the abuser in the relationships.
Justin Hooker had very strong feelings for Nadya and seemed devoted to her. If he believed her accusations, he would have had a very strong motive to commit this crime.
Investigators charge Nadya Swartz and Justin Hooker with murder. Facing a mountain of evidence, they both decide to take plea deals.
If they were going to accept this plea, they were going to have to provide the court with information that the investigators needed, mainly where was this firearm. And they also have to tell what they did that caused Kenny to be murdered.
Nadya and Justin agree to the terms. Based on their subsequent statements, authorities believe Kenny's murder was premeditated.
My opinion with Nadya is that she plays on the jealousy of Justin to hype him up, to say, hey, if we're going to have a good relationship and love each other forever, Kenny can't be in the picture. And I think she came up with this plan to ambush and execute Kenny.
I think Nadya had a very weird, dark, romantic fantasy about murder, and it seemed to me like she was just playing a game of who would kill for me.
Well, What we believed is Nadya took Justin to the bridge with his gun and left him there. Nadya then goes and picks Kenny up. She was able to lure Kenny back to the bridge with the understanding that they were going to try and get back together. Using this ruse, gets Kenny down the path to the bridge, and then that's where Justin comes out.
Due to the lack of defensive wounds, investigators do not believe there was any sort of confrontation between Kenny and his killers.
This was an execution, just an ambush. Kenny didn't know that it was coming. We're able to learn later that Justin sold the gun, but we were never able to establish where that firearm went.
In March 2021, Nadya Swartz and Justin Hooker received their fates. The 21-year-olds are each sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole.
I hope to God they don't ever get out.
In less than a year, the Justin that I knew went from being a loving and sweet guy to a killer within 6 months. It's shocking. I believe we all have the potential to kill somebody, but I believe that Nadya is the one that brought it out of him. Gave him that whole, I can do this, you know, I can go and shoot a guy. And so he did.
Nadya was very insecure. And so she wanted to find somebody that would do anything for her, including killing someone. She didn't care which one of them died. She just wanted someone to kill for her.
She was a puppet master with the strings, so to speak.
I don't think Nadya is remorseful for Kenny's death at all. I think she's evil.
They left him in there like he was garbage. My son wasn't garbage.
Lord mercy, I wish Kenny hadn't went off with them that night. I lost my everything.
I want him to be remembered by his good heart and his helpfulness, the way he made people smile. He was more than a murderer. He was a person.
The road that cuts through the quiet countryside near Chillenden, in Kent, does not look like the kind of place where violence happens. It is narrow, bordered by hedges and trees, the kind of path that feels familiar even to those who have never walked it before. On a summer afternoon, it holds a stillness that seems almost protective, as if the landscape itself is keeping watch. On July 9th, 1996, that road carried nothing unusual, no sense of urgency, no visible danger, no warning that anything was about to go wrong. It was just a route home for Lynn Russell and her two daughters, Josie Russell and Megan Russell. It was part of a routine so ordinary it barely registered as a decision. They had gone out, completed a simple errand at the local post office, and were now making their way back. There is something deeply unsettling about how unremarkable that sounds, because it means there was no moment where they could have known to turn around, no instinct that could have warned them that the safety of their world was about to collapse. The events that unfolded in the minutes that followed would become one of the most disturbing and controversial criminal cases in modern British history, not only because of the brutality of the attack, but because of the uncertainty that would linger long after the violence itself had ended. It is often said that the most haunting crimes are the ones that defy clear explanation, the ones that resist being neatly understood. This was one of those cases. There was no obvious motive, no immediate clarity about who was responsible, and no straightforward path to justice. Instead, what emerged was a story fractured by doubt, shaped as much by what could not be proven as by what was known. Somewhere along that quiet stretch of countryside, a stranger appeared. There is no evidence to suggest that this encounter was planned in any conventional sense. No indication that the victims were specifically targeted in advance. The randomness of it is part of what makes the case so deeply disturbing. Violence, when it has a motive, can at least be contextualized, however imperfectly. But violence without a clear reason creates a different kind of fear, one that suggests vulnerability, without limits. At some point along that road, the ordinary sequence of a mother walking with her children was interrupted by something incomprehensible. The attack itself would later be described as exceptionally brutal, carried out with a level of force that seemed to go beyond any rational objective. It was not a robbery. There was no meaningful attempt to take anything from them. Instead, the focus of the violence was the victims themselves. And that detail alone would shape how investigators, the public, and the courts try to make sense of what had happened. In the aftermath, 2 lives were lost, and 1 was altered forever. The fact that one of the children survived, despite sustaining catastrophic injuries, introduced both hope and complexity into the case. A survivor means there is someone who was there, someone who endured the same event and lived. But survival does not always bring clarity. Trauma can obscure memory, fracture perception, and leave behind gaps that cannot easily be filled. And so, even with a living witness, the central question remained: who had done this and why? As the investigation unfolded, it quickly became clear that this would not be a simple case to solve. The brutality demanded answers, and the pressure to find them was immediate and intense. But from the very beginning, there were inconsistencies, uncertainties, and decisions that would later be questioned. A suspect would be identified, a narrative would begin to take shape, and a conviction would eventually be secured. Yet even as the legal process moved forward, doubts refused to disappear. Over time, those doubts would grow louder, fueled by the absence of definitive physical evidence and the emergence of alternative possibilities. Another name would enter the conversation, another potential explanation that seemed, in some ways, to fit the known facts just as well, if not better. And still, nothing would be conclusively proven. What happened on that road near Chillenden did not end when the violence stopped. It extended into courtrooms, into appeals, into years of debate about whether justice had truly been served or whether a critical mistake had been made. Cases like this do not settle easily into the past. They linger, unresolved in the minds of those who follow them, shaped by the uncomfortable reality that truth and proof are not always the same thing. There are moments in every investigation where the path forward seems clear, where the available evidence points in a particular direction strongly enough to justify action. But clarity can be deceptive. In this case, each apparent answer seemed to open the door to new questions, and each conclusion carried with it a degree of uncertainty that could not be fully eliminated. The result is a story that exists in tension, a story where the facts are known, but their meaning remains contested. For the victims, there is no ambiguity about what was lost. A mother and her young daughter were killed in an act of extreme violence, and another child was left to rebuild a life marked by unimaginable trauma. For the justice system, however, the case represents something more complicated, a test of how certainty is constructed, how evidence is interpreted, and how easily a narrative can solidify even when key pieces are missing. As we begin to examine this case in detail, it is important to hold on to that tension. This is not simply a story about a crime. It is a story about the search for truth in a situation where truth may never be fully confirmed. It is about the gap between what we believe happened and what could be proven beyond doubt. And it begins, as many of the most unsettling stories do, with something entirely ordinary: a walk home on a quiet road, under a calm summer sky, where nothing seemed out of place until, suddenly, everything was. In order to understand what was lost on that July afternoon, it is necessary to step away from the violence for a moment and look instead at the life that existed before it, quiet, ordinary, and, in many ways, unremarkable in the way that most lives are. The setting itself plays an important role in this story. The village of Chillenden, located in the county of Kent in the United Kingdom, is the kind of rural environment often associated with stability and calm. It is a place where daily routines unfold without interruption, where people move through familiar spaces with a sense of ease that comes from repetition. There is no expectation of sudden danger in such places, no anticipation that something violent might intrude upon the rhythm of an ordinary day. That sense of safety is not just a backdrop. It is a defining feature of the environment in which this crime occurred. It shapes how the events are perceived, and it deepens the shock of what followed. Within this setting, the lives of Lynn Russell and her two daughters, Josie Russell and Megan Russell, were structured around routines that reflected both simplicity and care. On the surface, there is little that distinguishes their day from countless others. They went to the local post office, completed a task, and began the walk home. It is precisely this lack of distinction that makes the case so unsettling. There was no deviation from normal behavior, no unusual decision that might later be interpreted as a turning point. Everything about the day suggested continuity, not disruption. And yet, within that continuity, something irreversible was waiting. Lynn Russell, at 45 years old, occupied the role of a mother navigating the responsibilities of daily life. The available details do not attempt to construct an elaborate portrait of her personality, but her actions speak clearly enough. She was present with her children, guiding them through the routines of the day, ensuring that practical tasks were completed. There's a quiet significance in that kind of presence, in the way ordinary responsibilities form the structure of a life. It is easy, in retrospect, to overlook these details, to focus instead on the dramatic elements of the case. But it is precisely those ordinary moments that define what was taken. Lynn's role was not defined by the manner of her death, but by the continuity of care that preceded it. That continuity was interrupted, not replaced. Her daughters, Josie and Megan, represent two different stages of childhood, and that difference matters when considering both the impact of the event and the way it is remembered. Josie Russell, at 9 years old, was old enough to have a developing awareness of the world, old enough to understand routines and expectations, yet still young enough to exist within the protective structure provided by a parent. Megan Russell, at 6, occupied an even earlier stage, one defined more by dependence, by trust, by the assumption that safety is constant because it has always been present. These distinctions are subtle, but they underscore the vulnerability inherent in the situation. Neither child had any reason to anticipate danger. Their understanding of the world, shaped entirely by prior experience, would not have included the possibility of what was about to happen. The journey they undertook that day was not unusual. Walking to and from the post office was a routine activity, one that would not have required special consideration or preparation. The route itself, passing through a more secluded area near a wooded path, was part of that routine. Familiarity can create a sense of invisibility around risk. When a place is known, it is no longer evaluated in the same way. It becomes an extension of daily life rather than an environment that needs to be assessed for danger. That familiarity played a role in how the events unfolded, not as a cause, but as a condition that allowed the ordinary to proceed uninterrupted until it was too late to change course. The significance of this context becomes clearer when contrasted with what would later be discovered. At the scene, the absence of theft, the lack of any clear material motive, suggests that the victims were not targeted for what they had, but simply for being there. This introduces a level of unpredictability that is difficult to reconcile. In many criminal cases, motive provides a framework through which the event can be understood. It does not justify the act, but offers an explanation that can be analyzed, debated, and, to some extent, contained. In this case, that framework is missing. The attack appears to have been driven by something internal to the perpetrator rather than by any identifiable external objective. That absence of motive shifts the focus back onto the victims, not as participants in the event, but as individuals who were placed in its path without warning or reason. The day itself, July 9th, 1996, does not carry any inherent significance outside of what occurred. There were no prior indications that it would become a point of reference in discussions of violent crime. No signals that it would later be examined in such detail. It began like any other day, with the quiet continuity of routine. That normality is essential to understanding the emotional weight of the case. It reinforces the idea that the boundary between safety and danger is not always marked, that it can be crossed without notice. For Lynn Russell and her daughters, the day did not present itself as different. There was no moment of hesitation, no decision that can be revisited with the benefit of hindsight. Their actions were consistent with everything that had come before. As the narrative moves forward into the events that took place on that isolated stretch of road, it is important to hold onto this context. The violence that followed did not emerge from chaos, but from order. It interrupted a sequence that was stable and predictable, replacing it with something that defied both expectation and understanding. The contrast between those two states, the ordinary and the incomprehensible, is what gives this case its enduring impact. It is not only about what happened, but about where and how it happened, and about the people whose lives were defined not by the violence itself, but by the normality that preceded it. The transition from ordinary routine to irreversible violence did not come with warning. And that absence of warning is central to understanding the events that unfolded on that quiet stretch of road near Chillenden. There was no recorded struggle leading up to the encounter. No indication that Lynn Russell or her daughters had any opportunity to anticipate what was about to happen. At some point along the secluded path, a man approached them. The details of his appearance, his movements, even the precise moment of first contact, remain undefined within the available evidence. What is known is the outcome of that encounter, and the sequence of actions that followed once control had been established. The attacker forced the three victims off the path and into a more concealed area, binding them near a cluster of bushes. This act of restraint is significant. It suggests a deliberate attempt to control the situation, to limit movement and resistance, and to create a setting in which the attacker could act without interruption. It was not a fleeting interaction, nor an impulsive strike followed by immediate flight. There was a process, however brief, during which the attacker asserted dominance over the victims, transforming a public space into a controlled environment. The presence of that control introduces a level of intention that complicates any interpretation of the attack as purely spontaneous. It does not necessarily imply long-term planning, but it does indicate that once the encounter began, the attacker acted with purpose. The weapon used, a hammer, was not designed for subtlety. It is a tool associated with force, with impact, with actions that are direct and irreversible. The use of such a weapon in this context speaks to the nature of the violence that followed. It was not distant or detached. It required proximity, repetition, and physical exertion. Each strike would have been deliberate, each movement reinforcing the attacker's control over the situation. The brutality described in the aftermath is not incidental. It is a defining characteristic of the incident, one that shaped both the investigation and the public perception of the crime. Lynn Russell was attacked first. She sustained multiple blows to the head, injuries that were ultimately fatal. The extent of those injuries indicates not only the use of force, but the repetition of that force. This was not a single act, but a sustained assault. The positioning of the victims, bound and unable to defend themselves effectively, meant that the attacker encountered little resistance once the assault began. The imbalance of power in that moment is difficult to fully comprehend, but it is essential to acknowledge. It underscores the vulnerability of the victims and the complete control exercised by the attacker. Megan Russell, at 6 years old, was subjected to the same form of violence. The inclusion of a child in an attack of this nature intensifies its impact, not because it changes the mechanics of what occurred, but because it alters the way the event is perceived. It removes any residual notion that the attack might have been driven by a specific grievance or targeted motive. The presence of a young child among the victims reinforces the idea that this was an act of indiscriminate violence, one that did not differentiate between individuals based on age or vulnerability. The injuries inflicted on Megan were also fatal, and they mirrored the brutality seen in the attack on her mother. The repetition of the method suggests consistency in the attacker's actions, a pattern that would later be examined in attempts to understand his behavior. Josie Russell, the eldest daughter, experienced the same sequence of events, but with a different outcome. She was struck multiple times, sustaining catastrophic injuries to her skull. The severity of those injuries would, under most circumstances, be expected to result in death. That she survived is not indicative of a lesser degree of violence directed toward her, but rather an outcome that defies expectation. At some point after the assault, the attacker left the scene, leaving all 3 victims behind. The decision to leave suggests that the attacker believed his actions were complete, that there was no need to remain or to ensure any particular outcome beyond what had already been done. In leaving, he abandoned the scene to silence, to the isolation that had allowed the attack to occur in the first place. The aftermath of the incident is defined by that silence. There were no immediate witnesses to intervene, no rapid response that might have altered the outcome. The secluded nature of the location, which had initially contributed to the sense of safety, now functioned as a barrier to assistance. For Lynn Russell and Megan Russell, the injuries sustained were fatal, and there was no opportunity for recovery. For Josie Russell, the situation was different. Despite the severity of her injuries, she remained alive. The precise duration of time between the attack and the arrival of help is not detailed in the available data. But what is clear is that she endured a period of extreme vulnerability before being discovered. Her survival introduces a critical element into the narrative, not only because it represents a departure from the expected outcome of such injuries, but because it provides a living connection to the event itself. However, survival does not equate to clarity. The trauma experienced, both physical and psychological, complicates any assumption that the event could be fully reconstructed through her perspective alone. The scene itself offered investigators a set of facts that were both revealing and incomplete. The absence of stolen items indicated that robbery was not the primary motive. The method of attack, the use of a hammer, and the repeated application of force pointed toward a level of aggression that exceeded any practical objective. These elements would later be analyzed in attempts to identify patterns, to link the crime to known behaviors or individuals. But at the moment of discovery, they serve primarily to highlight the severity of what had occurred. There was no immediate explanation that could account for all aspects of the incident. The randomness, the brutality, and the lack of a clear motive combined to create a scenario that resisted simple interpretation. As investigators began to piece together the sequence of events, they were confronted with a case that did not conform easily to established categories. It was not a burglary gone wrong, not a targeted attack driven by personal conflict, not an incident that could be quickly contextualized within a known pattern. Instead, it existed in a space defined by uncertainty. The attacker had appeared, exercised control, inflicted extreme violence, and then disappeared, leaving behind a scene that raised more questions than it answered. This lack of immediate clarity would shape every stage of the investigation that followed, influencing the direction of inquiries, the identification of suspects, and ultimately the outcome of the case itself. What happened on that road was not only an act of violence, but the beginning of a prolonged effort to understand an event that, by its very nature, resisted understanding. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, the investigation moved forward under intense pressure, shaped by both the brutality of the crime and the expectation that those responsible would be identified quickly. The scene itself presented investigators with a series of stark facts: 3 victims, bound and attacked with extreme violence, in a location that offered privacy but little in the way of direct evidence. There were no clear signs of theft, no obvious motive that could anchor the inquiry to a specific line of reasoning. This absence created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the investigation had to construct direction from fragments, physical observations, behavioral assumptions, and the urgency imposed by public attention. From the outset, the case demanded resolution, and that demand would influence how decisions were made in the critical early stages. As detectives worked to establish a timeline and identify potential suspects, attention began to focus on individuals whose backgrounds aligned, at least superficially, with the nature of the crime. Among them was Michael Stone, a man whose history included violent behavior and drug addiction. These factors, while not evidence in themselves, positioned him within a category of individuals often scrutinized in serious criminal investigations. The logic was not unique to this case. It reflected a broader investigative tendency to prioritize those who appear capable of committing such acts based on past conduct. In the absence of definitive physical evidence, this kind of profiling can take on increased significance, shaping both the direction and the momentum of the inquiry. The case against Stone began to take form not through direct forensic links, but through statements attributed to him by others. Specifically, individuals who had shared time with him in custody reported that he had confessed to the killings. These alleged admissions became a central pillar of the prosecution's argument. Confessions, even secondhand ones, carry weight, particularly when they appear to align with known details of a crime. However, they also introduce complexities, especially when they originate from environments where incentives, personal motives, or misunderstandings can influence what is said and how it is reported. The reliance on such testimony would later become one of the most contested aspects of the case. At the same time, the investigation faced a significant limitation: the absence of direct physical evidence linking Stone to the scene. There was no conclusive DNA match, no fingerprints, no material trace that could place him at the location of the attack with certainty. This gap did not halt the progression of the case, but it did create a reliance on circumstantial elements and interpretive reasoning. Investigators had to weigh the credibility of witness statements against the lack of forensic confirmation, a balance that is often difficult to maintain without introducing doubt. As the case moved toward prosecution, this imbalance became more pronounced, raising questions about the strength of the overall evidentiary foundation. Despite these challenges, the momentum of the investigation continued to build. Stone was charged, and the narrative presented in court emphasized his history, the alleged confessions, and the argument that these elements, taken together, established his guilt beyond reasonable doubt. In 1998, he was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. For many, this outcome represented closure, a resolution to a case that had generated widespread concern. But for others, the conviction did not eliminate uncertainty. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new phase, one in which the integrity of the investigation itself would come under scrutiny. The concerns that emerged were not based on a single issue, but on a combination of factors that, collectively, suggested the possibility of error. The absence of physical evidence remained a central point of contention. In cases involving such extreme violence, it is often expected that some form of forensic trace will link the perpetrator to the scene. The lack of such evidence in this instance did not prove innocence, but it did weaken the certainty of the conclusion. Additionally, the reliability of the prison informants became a subject of debate. Testimony obtained in custodial settings can be influenced by a range of variables, including the prospect of personal benefit, the dynamics of the environment, and the potential for misinterpretation. As these concerns gained attention, the case began to shift from a resolved matter to a contested one. This shift was reflected in the legal proceedings that followed. In 2001, Stone's conviction was overturned on appeal, a decision that acknowledged the presence of significant issues in the original trial. The overturning of a conviction does not, in itself, determine guilt or innocence. Rather, it indicates that the process by which the verdict was reached was flawed in a way that could have affected the outcome. The case was returned to court for retrial, reopening questions that many had assumed were settled. In 2002, after a second trial, Stone was again found guilty and his life sentence was reinstated. This reaffirmation of the verdict did not resolve the underlying doubts. Instead, it highlighted the persistence of those doubts, as the same concerns that had led to the appeal continued to be raised by critics and observers. While the legal system had reached a conclusion, the broader conversation about the case remained unsettled. It is within this context that another figure entered the narrative, Levi Belfield, a man later identified as a serial offender with a history of targeting women and children. The emergence of Belfield as a potential suspect introduced a new dimension to the investigation, one that was not fully developed during the original proceedings. The basis for this consideration included behavioral similarities, as well as the existence of a DNA sample from the crime scene that was suggested to have a possible connection to him, though not conclusively. Additionally, there were reports that Belfield had, at some point, claimed responsibility for the attack. These elements did not amount to sufficient evidence for prosecution, but they were significant enough to reignite debate about the identity of the true perpetrator. The introduction of an alternative suspect did not replace the existing narrative. It complicated it. If Belfield could not be definitively linked to the crime, and if the case against Stone remained dependent on contested testimony and lacking in physical proof, then the question of who committed the murders remained open. This uncertainty is not easily resolved within the framework of the legal system, which requires conclusions to be drawn based on the available evidence, even when that evidence is incomplete. As a result, the investigation into the murders of Lynn Russell and Megan Russell, and the attempted murder of Josie Russell, became not only a search for a perpetrator, but a case study in the limitations of that search. Each development, each piece of testimony, each legal decision, each new line of inquiry added layers to a narrative that resisted finality. The investigation did not follow a straight path from crime to resolution. Instead, it moved through stages of assertion and doubt, conviction and reconsideration, each phase leaving behind questions that could not be fully answered. In the absence of definitive proof, the case remained suspended between competing interpretations, shaped as much by what cannot be established as by what can. The courtroom phase of the case marked a shift from investigation to judgment, from the gathering of fragments to the construction of a narrative intended to meet the legal threshold of certainty. By the time proceedings began, the focus had narrowed around a single individual, Michael Stone. The prosecution's task was not simply to suggest his involvement, but to establish, beyond reasonable doubt, that he was responsible for the murders of Lynn Russell and Megan Russell, as well as the attempted murder of Josie Russell. In the absence of direct forensic evidence linking him to the scene, the case presented in court relied heavily on circumstantial elements and, most critically, on testimony from individuals who claimed that Stone had confessed to them while in custody. These statements formed the backbone of the prosecution's argument, offering a version of events that, if accepted as credible, provided a pathway to conviction. The structure of the prosecution's case was built around the idea that Stone's history, marked by prior violence and drug addiction, aligned with the profile of someone capable of committing such an act, and that his alleged admissions confirmed that alignment. The courtroom became a space where these elements were assembled into a coherent narrative. A man with a troubled past, placed within reach of the crime, and connected to it through his own words as reported by others. This narrative did not depend on physical traces. Instead, it depended on the interpretation of behavior, credibility, and consistency. The defense, in turn, faced the challenge of dismantling that narrative without the benefit of a clear alternative explanation for the crime. Their approach centered on the weaknesses inherent in the prosecution's evidence, particularly the reliability of the prison informants. Testimony obtained in custodial environments is often scrutinized because of the potential for personal gain, coercion, or miscommunication. The defense argued that such statements could not be treated as definitive proof, especially in a case lacking corroborating physical evidence. They also pointed to the absence of DNA, fingerprints, or any material link between Stone and the scene, emphasizing that the burden of proof required more than inference and secondhand accounts. This tension between narrative and evidence defined the proceedings. On one side was a story that appeared internally consistent, supported by multiple testimonies that pointed in the same direction. On the other was the recognition that those testimonies existed in isolation from the kind of objective verification typically expected in cases of this magnitude. The jury was tasked with navigating this tension, weighing the credibility of witnesses against the absence of forensic confirmation, and determining whether the totality of the evidence met the standard required for conviction. In 1998, that determination was made. Stone was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. The verdict brought a formal conclusion to the trial, but it did not eliminate the underlying uncertainties. Instead, it shifted them into a different context, one in which the focus turned to the integrity of the process itself. Questions began to emerge about whether the reliance on contested testimony had overshadowed the lack of physical evidence, and whether alternative lines of inquiry had been sufficiently explored. These questions did not remain confined to informal discussion. They became the basis for legal action. In 2001, Stone's conviction was overturned on appeal. The decision to quash the verdict did not assert his innocence, but it acknowledged that there were significant issues in the original trial that could have affected the outcome. The case was returned to court for retrial, reopening a process that many had assumed was complete. This development underscored the fragility of the initial conclusion, highlighting the extent to which it depended on elements that were open to challenge. The retrial in 2002 followed a similar structure, with the prosecution once again presenting the alleged confessions and the broader narrative of Stone's background and behavior. The defense reiterated its concerns about the reliability of the evidence, maintaining that the case lacked the necessary foundation to support a conviction beyond reasonable doubt. Despite these arguments, the jury reached the same conclusion as before. Stone was again found guilty, and his life sentence was reinstated. The repetition of the verdict might suggest a reaffirmation of certainty, but in this case, it did not fully resolve the debate. The same factors that had prompted the appeal continued to exist. and the questions surrounding them persisted. The legal system had delivered a consistent outcome, but consistency does not necessarily equate to clarity. While the courts had concluded that the evidence was sufficient to convict, the absence of definitive physical proof remained a point of contention, and the reliance on contested testimony continued to be scrutinized. Complicating matters further was the emergence of another potential suspect, Levi Belfield. Although he was not part of the original trial, his later identification as a serial offender with a history of targeting women and children introduced a new perspective on the case. Reports of a possible DNA connection to the crime scene, though not conclusive, and claims that he had admitted involvement added to the uncertainty. However, these elements did not meet the threshold required for prosecution, and Belfield was never charged in relation to the murders. His presence in the narrative functions as an unresolved variable, an alternative possibility that cannot be confirmed, but also cannot be entirely dismissed. As a result, the outcome of the case exists in a state of duality. On one level, there is a clear legal conclusion. Michael Stone has been tried, convicted, and remains imprisoned for the crimes. On another level, there's an ongoing debate about whether that conclusion accurately reflects the reality of what happened. This duality is not uncommon in complex criminal cases, but it is particularly pronounced here due to the combination of factors involved. The lack of physical evidence, the contested nature of key testimony, and the existence of a plausible alternative suspect. The courtroom, in this instance, did not serve as the final arbiter of certainty, but rather as a mechanism for reaching a decision within the constraints of the available evidence. That decision carries legal authority, but it does not eliminate the ambiguity that surrounds the case. For the families of the victims, the verdict represents a form of closure, a recognition by the legal system that responsibility has been assigned. For others, including legal observers and members of the public, it remains a point of contention, a case that illustrates the difficulty of achieving definitive justice in the absence of unequivocal proof. The outcome, while final in a legal sense, continues to be examined, questioned, and debated, reflecting the enduring complexity of a case that resists simple resolution. In the years that followed the trials, the case did not fade into the background in the way many resolved cases do. Instead, it remained present, circulating through legal discussions, public debate, and quiet reflection, because its conclusion, while definitive on paper, left behind a residue of uncertainty that could not be easily dismissed. At the center of this enduring aftermath is Josie Russell, whose survival transformed her from a victim of the attack into a living witness to its consequences. The injuries she sustained were severe, described as catastrophic damage to the skull, injuries that would typically be fatal. That she lived is often characterized as extraordinary. But survival in this context is not a simple resolution. It is the beginning of a different kind of story, one defined by recovery, adaptation, and the long-term effects of trauma. The process of healing, both physically and psychologically, extends far beyond the immediate aftermath of an event like this. It involves not only medical treatment, but the gradual reconstruction of a life interrupted at a formative stage. Over time, Josie's path would come to include advocacy, using her experience to support improvements in the way victims of crime are treated and assisted. This aspect of the aftermath shifts the focus from what was taken to what continues, from loss to resilience, without diminishing the gravity of the original event. Beyond the individual, the impact of the case spread outward into the community and the broader public consciousness. The setting of the crime, a quiet rural area near Chillenden in Kent, had been defined by a sense of safety that now appeared fragile. Incidents of extreme violence are often associated with urban environments or specific contexts, But this case disrupted that assumption. It demonstrated that the absence of prior incidents does not equate to immunity, that even the most familiar and seemingly secure environments can be sites of sudden and inexplicable harm. This realization does not manifest as constant fear, but it does alter perception. It introduces a degree of caution, a recognition that safety is not an absolute condition, but a relative one. For those who followed the case, whether locally or nationally, the aftermath also involved a different kind of engagement, an ongoing evaluation of the justice system itself. The conviction of Michael Stone, upheld after retrial, provided a formal answer to the question of responsibility. Yet the concerns raised during and after the proceedings did not disappear. The absence of direct physical evidence, the reliance on contested testimony, and the later emergence of Levi Belfield as a possible alternative suspect all contributed to a sense that the case was not fully resolved in a substantive sense, even if it was closed in a legal one. This distinction between legal closure and factual certainty is critical. The justice system operates within defined standards, requiring that decisions be made based on the evidence available at the time. Those decisions carry authority, but they do not necessarily eliminate all doubt. In this case, doubt persists not because of a single overlooked detail, but because of the cumulative effect of multiple uncertainties. The possibility that an error may have occurred, whether in the identification of the suspect, the evaluation of evidence, or the interpretation of testimony, remains part of the conversation. At the same time, the alternative does not offer clarity either. The suggestion that another individual might be responsible is supported by elements that are themselves inconclusive. A possible DNA link that is not definitive, reported admissions that are not formally substantiated. These factors introduce new questions without providing firm answers. As a result, the case occupies a space where competing narratives coexist, each supported by partial evidence, neither capable of fully displacing the other. This condition is inherently unstable, and it resists the kind of closure that is often expected in the aftermath of a criminal trial. For observers, this creates a tension between acceptance and skepticism. Accepting the verdict means acknowledging the authority of the legal process, recognizing that a conclusion has been reached according to established standards. Questioning the verdict involves engaging with the limitations of that process, considering the possibility that those standards were met without capturing the full reality of the situation. Both positions are shaped by the same set of facts, but they lead to different interpretations of what those facts mean. This divergence is not easily reconciled, and it contributes to the case's enduring presence in public discourse. What remains constant, regardless of interpretation, is the impact on the victims. Lynn Russell and Megan Russell lost their lives in an act of extreme violence that has never been fully explained. Their absence is not altered by the debates that followed, nor is it mitigated by the passage of time. The focus on legal outcomes and investigative controversies, while important, exists alongside this fundamental reality. The case is not only a question of who committed the crime, but also a record of what was taken and what cannot be restored. In reflecting on this case, it becomes clear that it does not conform to a simple narrative arc. There is no moment where all questions are answered, no point at which uncertainty gives way to complete understanding. Instead, it offers a more complex picture, one in which the search for truth is ongoing, shaped by the interplay between evidence, interpretation, and the limitations of both. The road near Chillenden, once an unremarkable part of daily life, has become a symbol of that complexity, a place where the ordinary intersected with the incomprehensible, leaving behind a story that continues to be examined, not because it can be resolved, but because it cannot. If there is a final chapter to this case, it does not arrive in the form of a definitive answer. but as a continuation of the questions that have followed it from the beginning. Cases like this do not conclude cleanly. Instead, they settle into a space where facts are fixed, but meaning remains unsettled. What happened on that quiet road near Chillenden is not in dispute. The sequence of violence, the lives lost, the single survivor, but the interpretation of those facts, the assignment of certainty, and the confidence in the outcome all remain subjects of ongoing reflection. Over time, the case has come to represent more than the crime itself. It has become an example of how the pursuit of justice can be shaped by urgency, by pressure, and by the inherent limitations of evidence. When a crime is as severe and as emotionally charged as this one, there is an understandable demand for resolution. The public expects answers. The system is driven to provide them. And investigators work within that environment to construct a narrative that can withstand scrutiny. But the need for resolution can sometimes intersect uncomfortably with the uncertainty of the available facts. In this case, that intersection is impossible to ignore. The conviction of Michael Stone provides a legal endpoint, a conclusion that has been tested through appeal and reaffirmed through retrial. From the perspective of the justice system, the case has been processed, examined, and decided. Yet the persistence of doubt suggests that the legal endpoint is not the same as a definitive understanding of what occurred. This distinction is not a failure of the system in a simple sense. Rather, it reflects the reality that legal standards operate within constraints. Evidence can be incomplete, testimony can be contested, and still a decision must be made. The system is designed to reach conclusions, even when those conclusions exist alongside uncertainty. At the same time, the emergence of Levi Belfield as a possible alternative suspect complicates any sense of finality. His known history of violence against women and children introduces a parallel narrative, one that appears to align with certain aspects of the crime. The mention of a possible DNA connection, though not conclusive, and reports of claimed responsibility add further layers to that narrative. But these elements remain insufficient to establish guilt in a legal sense, leaving them suspended in a space between possibility and proof. This creates a situation where two competing interpretations exist without one definitively displacing the other. For those who study cases like this, the tension between these interpretations becomes the central point of focus. It raises broader questions about how truth is determined, about the relationship between evidence and belief, and about the extent to which certainty is ever fully attainable in complex criminal investigations. These are not abstract questions. They have direct implications for how justice is understood and applied. If a conviction can be both legally sound and publicly contested, then the concept of closure becomes more complicated. It is no longer a single moment or outcome, but an ongoing process of evaluation and reevaluation. In this context, the role of the survivor, Josie Russell, takes on additional significance. Her life after the attack is not defined solely by what happened, but by how she has continued in its aftermath. Survival, in this sense, is not just a biological fact. It is an enduring presence that connects the past to the present. Her recovery and subsequent advocacy highlight the human dimension of the case, grounding it in lived experience rather than abstract debate. While legal arguments and investigative theories may shift over time, the reality of what she endured remains constant. It serves as a reminder that behind every contested detail, there is a personal history that cannot be reduced to evidence or argument. The broader impact of the case also extends into how similar crimes are perceived and investigated. It underscores the importance of evidence, its collection, its interpretation, and its limitations. It illustrates the risks associated with relying too heavily on certain types of testimony without corroboration. And it highlights the challenges of revisiting cases when new information emerges after a conviction has already been secured. These lessons are not unique to this case, but they're made more visible by its complexity and by the attention it has received. As time passes, the intensity of public focus may diminish, but the underlying questions remain. They persist in legal discussions, in media coverage, and in the quiet consideration of those who continue to examine the case. There is a sense in which the story is complete, events have occurred, decisions have been made, and outcomes have been established. But there's also a sense in which it is not complete at all, because the central uncertainty has never been fully resolved. This duality is what gives the case its lasting significance. It exists as both a concluded legal matter and an open question, a combination that resists simple categorization. In the end, the road near Chillenden remains unchanged in its physical form. It is still a quiet path, still part of a landscape that appears, at first glance, undisturbed. But its meaning has been altered by what happened there. It is no longer just a route between 2 points. It is a place where the ordinary was interrupted by something that is yet to be fully understood. And perhaps that is the most enduring aspect of this case. Not the violence itself, nor the legal outcome, but the space it leaves behind. A space defined by the distance between what is known and what can be proven. A space where the truth exists, but remains just out of reach. In the end, what remains is not a single, settled conclusion, but a lingering awareness of how fragile certainty can be when it is built on incomplete foundations. The case of Lynn Russell and Megan Russell, 1996, does not resolve into a clear narrative with a definitive endpoint. Instead, it continues to exist in the space between resolution and doubt, shaped by facts that are fixed and interpretations that are not. The violence that occurred on that July afternoon is undeniable, as is the loss it caused. Lynn Russell and Megan Russell did not survive, and Josie Russell was left to carry the consequences of that day forward into a life defined, at least in part, by recovery. These elements are not subject to debate. They form the core of the case, the reality that anchors everything else. Around that core, however, the narrative becomes less certain. The legal system has identified a perpetrator in Michael Stone, and that identification has been tested through trial and retrial, resulting in a consistent verdict. Yet the absence of direct physical evidence, combined with the reliance on contested testimony, leaves room for continued questioning. This is not an abstract concern. It is a specific tension between the standards required to reach a verdict and the expectations people have for what constitutes definitive proof. In many cases, those two align closely enough to produce a sense of closure. In this case, they do not fully converge, and that gap becomes the space in which doubt persists. The introduction of Levi Belfield as a possible alternative suspect further complicates the picture, not because it replaces one narrative with another, but because it introduces a second narrative that cannot be conclusively resolved. The suggestion of a possible DNA link, though not definitive, and reports of claimed responsibility create an additional layer of uncertainty. These elements do not meet the threshold required to alter the legal outcome, but they are sufficient to prevent the case from settling into a single, uncontested explanation. As a result, the story remains open in a way that many criminal cases are not. It is not open in the sense that nothing is known, but in the sense that what is known does not fully determine what is believed. This distinction is subtle, but it is essential to understanding why the case continues to be discussed and re-examined. It speaks to a broader issue within the justice system: the difference between establishing guilt to a legal standard and establishing truth to a level that satisfies all scrutiny. Those two objectives are related, but they are not identical. and the gap between them can become visible in cases where evidence is limited or contested. In reflecting on this case, it is also important to return to the individuals at its center, not as elements within a legal argument, but as people whose lives were directly affected. Lynn Russell and Megan Russell are not defined solely by the manner of their deaths, but by the lives they lived before that moment. Lives characterized by routine, by relationships, by the ordinary details that are often overlooked until they are no longer present. Josie Russell represents a continuation of that story, a connection between what was lost and what remains. Her survival and the path she has taken in its aftermath provide a counterpoint to the violence, a reminder that even in the context of extreme harm, there can be elements of endurance and forward movement. The broader implications of the case extend beyond the individuals involved, touching on how society understands and responds to crime. It highlights the importance of evidence, not only in securing convictions, but in sustaining confidence in those convictions over time. It underscores the challenges faced by investigators when confronted with crimes that lack clear motives or definitive forensic links. And it raises questions about how the system adapts when new information emerges after a case has already been decided. These are not issues that can be resolved within a single case, but they are illuminated by it, providing a point of reference for ongoing discussions about justice, accountability, and the limits of certainty. As the years pass, the immediate intensity of the case may diminish, but its underlying questions remain. They persist in the background, shaping how similar cases are viewed and how the balance between evidence and interpretation is understood. The road near Chillenden, unchanged in its physical appearance, continues to carry the weight of what happened there, not as a visible marker, but as a point of memory. It is a place where the ordinary intersected with the incomprehensible, where a routine journey was transformed into an event that would be examined for decades without yielding a definitive answer. In that sense, the case does not end so much as it settles into a state of unresolved presence. It remains a story that is told not because it has been fully explained, but because it has not. A reminder that even within systems designed to produce certainty, there are moments where certainty remains just beyond reach.